Well, to anyone tuning in, today I'm pumped to be speaking with Jesse Shrader, who is the CEO of Amboss. And, I'm sure many Bitcoiners in the space already know who you are, but if someone's not, deep down the rabbit hole, I'd love to just have you give an intro to the audience.
Sure. Yeah, I started as a Bitcoiner and I tried to use Bitcoin for payments and I ran into a lot of difficulties. Paid way too much in fees, the transaction took too long, and it really motivated me to start working on the Lightning Network, which is really how Amboss came to be. Really, it's the homepage of the Lightning Network. We started with a Lightning Explorer, and we've built a ton of products. Amboss has really become a product-making machine that is building out all of the building blocks of a full payments ecosystem to help Bitcoin become a medium of exchange.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll note every time I pay in the United States, if I'm in New York visiting buddies, I'll go to PubKey and buy a beer with Lightning. If I go to Steak and Shake now, my wife asked me to go to Steak and Shake the other day for dinner. You pull out your phone and scan Lightning. So it's quite amazing, for people who, might not be so far down the rabbit hole. Bitcoin's amazing for settling large chunks of value and even smaller ones. But if you're putting payments on chain, it takes 10 minutes at least to get in a block. But Lightning, it's seamless. And the look on all my friends' faces, some of them aren't as far down the Bitcoin rabbit hole as myself. And when they see, a Lightning payment go through instantaneously, it's a lot of aha moments. So I'd love to just hear, maybe speak a little bit to when you first got into Lightning. And it's come a long way now today in 2026. First, I think the network was the Lightning Network, a layer 2 solution on Bitcoin. I believe the paper came out sometime around 2017 and it got implemented. So as someone building on the front lines, would love to just hear you speak a little bit about how you've seen Lightning progress.
Sure. Just starting out, the real motivation was because I paid $60 in transaction fees once, and I had a 15-minute window for the Bitcoin transaction to arrive. That was the state of Bitcoin payments. And my transaction didn't arrive in time, so they refunded me and had me try it again and pay the transaction fee again. So this was a particular time when Bitcoin transaction fees were so expensive. But it was so important to me at that time to really create a better payment system than the traditional finance system, because I was working in a job where I got to see kind of the aftermath of traditional finance practices, where they instituted all of these policies against the people that were customers of the bank. They were just trying to take as much money from them as possible and using weird backroom policies to take more money from customers. So Bitcoin was so important, and the state of things was Andreas Antonopoulos was talking about this crazy thing called the Lightning Network, that it might be a solution to some of the woes that we're experiencing in Bitcoin payments. And so I was digging a little bit deeper, and I created my first Lightning channel to this one guy that set up a video camera, and he's feeding chickens. If you pay the invoice, a couple of seeds drop out, the chickens come running over, you could see them live on the video feed, and it gave you that instant feedback. Somewhere else in the world, your payment had an impact. It made the chicken's day a little bit brighter, and it was just so inexpensive to have an impact somewhere else in the world. And that was telling me, this is my own policies, this is my money that I control, I can do whatever I want with it, and the payments are so fast and so cheap. And I just wanted to bring that experience to the rest of the world. But in order to do that, you were wrestling with raw code, using the command line interface, trying to get your Raspberry Pi to work. And so, me as an engineer, I see a beautiful system and a terrible user interface and user experience, and I have to bring this beautiful system to life, and I'm willing to go through whatever hell I have to in order to give that beautiful user experience and bring this beautiful system to the rest of the world.
Yeah, man, I'll say one of those moments too where it just kind of blew my mind, the Lightning Network, is when Nostr first came to be. And my bio on Nostr to this day has always been professional shit poster. I'll see a meme on Twitter or Instagram or make one myself, and I'll just post it. And to have someone who doesn't know who I am, just, pseudo-anonymous person on Nostr, to post a meme that in some cases I didn't even make, to get zap sats from anywhere in the world is such like, it just feels like you're living in the future. And anyone, I know private public key management might be a little nerve-wracking to some people. And even if it's a custodial Lightning solution, I just can't urge people enough to go and try something like that. Because when you have those moments, I mean, the chicken example is so cool. I hadn't heard of someone doing it, but it makes perfect sense. Seeing other use cases where if you want to, if you want to stream, a video, or maybe you want to get access to a certain AI model and you want it to be privacy focused, it just seems like there's so many use cases that Lightning is going to enable. And I know you guys have a big product release coming this Friday, so we'd love to hear you speak a little bit about the things on Amboss's roadmap.
Sure. Yeah, I think what we've got, and we're recording this a little bit before the release, but we'll be announcing Rails X. And so this is full peer-to-peer trading directly on the Lightning Network. So because Lightning is now a multi-currency system, so you've got channels of one currency and channels of another currency. And in order to trade between the two, a simple buy and sell involves sending a Lightning payment out one channel and receiving it in another of yours. So it travels in a circle, and that is just trading with your immediate peers. And it's completely decentralized. So now, we can have peer-to-peer trading anywhere in the world. You are keeping self-custody the entire time, and trades are happening at the speed of a Lightning payment, which we know is near instantaneous. So this is a complete game changer because it means that Lightning Network itself becomes a DEX, and regular folks like yourselves can become automated market makers in this new system. And we see Bitcoin is moving into the world of the foreign exchange market, which is the biggest market in the world. It's settling $9.5 trillion per day. And this technology means that all of that activity can be happening on the Lightning Network on Bitcoin.
I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing, and it ties into a point. I think Joe Consorti made this point, but maybe someone else has talked about it as well. But this idea of quote-unquote risk-free yield on Bitcoin, and obviously you have to know how to run a computer. I mean, Lightning is not totally foolproof, but in the sense that you keep collateral, or you keep your keys, and if you have a Lightning channel, you can earn fees on top of it. And it seems like there's going to be all these creative solutions, like something you just talked about. If you want to be a market maker and take some fees that way, it seems like there's going to be all these incredible ways. I mean, many Bitcoiners say, there's a famous meme with the duck quack, where does the yield come from? But if you can keep those keys and all of a sudden, earn a little extra Bitcoin, and on top of earning the yield, I feel like it's actually a very educational experience. I mean, full transparency for Nostr, I mostly use custodial solutions, but I have tried opening a Lightning channel, and I did so, and I did so with a buddy, and it was fine. But for someone who's not maybe as technical, I mean, now with AI, I think people can go farther along. But just to see the UX, the UI improvements, the things being built on top of it. I've seen on Nostr too, people using Lightning to get in and out of eCash, which offers all these privacy features. Nostr is another way too. I mean, I just talked about memes, but what's stopping someone from putting up some PR requests and saying, I don't care where you live in the world, I need a developer to do these. The developer that does this, that satisfies the requirements, passes all the tests, I will pay you Lightning immediately. So man, the use cases that are coming are just so exciting. And I think what it's going to do is, A, let the little guy, make some yield, or, make some extra sats, but then B, also just constantly, as Jeff Booth always talks about, the market should be deflationary, and all these services, whether it's exchanging currency, buying a stock, whatever it is, I do think you'll see more and more of this stuff be enabled with Lightning, which, man, it's just, to be able to go to a DEX and use Lightning as the base layer, that is so exciting.
It is. One thing we've been watching, and I've tried to sell people on Bitcoin payments, and I ran into an issue, is that people are afraid of Bitcoin's volatility. We can have extremely efficient payments, but sometimes people just aren't ready to start receiving Bitcoin. And because of this, it really pushed me in the direction of being okay with stable coins at the edges. And what Taproot Assets enables is for someone just at the edge, the last hop of a payment, for it to switch to a different currency. So you can have the efficiency of the Lightning Network and improve the payment processing experience for merchants, and they can still receive payments in whatever currency they want. It's none of my business what currency they're receiving. It's up to them. And it just looks like a Lightning payment. They can have very cheap, fast payments. And if they ever want to move it to their bank account, well, they just pay a Lightning invoice and have an off-ramp. So it goes directly into their bank. They're still able to pay their contractors, any of their vendors or suppliers. And I think that's what becomes very disruptive. Much more efficient payments, and whatever currency you want, this is an open, neutral protocol.
Yeah, 1,000%. I always joke with people that the day that, Apple Wallet, or I guess Google Pay Wallet too, puts it on an iPhone and you can just all of a sudden tap to pay with a Bitcoin wallet, I mean, it's just going to be, it's going to blast the doors open. People are just going to not even know that Bitcoin's going on in the back end. I learned recently actually that, in America we have, I think, like 3% credit card fees or, something like that. Other countries have different regulations, but regardless of what, they cap those fees at, it's just going to make it more efficient. I don't even think most people are going to understand they're using Bitcoin on the back end, and it's just going to be so seamless. And this is kind of a two-part question, but I'd love to ask, as you guys have been developing, what have you focused on to improve the UX and UI, and then how AI has changed that? And I just know, I was telling you before we got started, I'm not a professional developer, but I do enjoy tinkering. Now with AI, it's just been blowing my mind what I've been able to build, whether it's personal software or certain scripts that I would never have been able to write without these tools. But even as a hobbyist, I love asking actual professional developers how AI has helped them, code, and then also any tips you might have for someone, because whether you're writing, coding, whatever it is, I do think the caveat is you should actually do it yourself first, and then ask AI to help improve, rather than just be like, AI, do everything for me. That's typically when the Vibe coded app has a bunch of security issues, or the article reads like AI slop with a bunch of M dashes, and it's not just X, it's Y.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to know when to use those AI tools and when to use them right. Because at the end of the day, you're responsible for the work that you put out. But these are tools, and they are incredible productivity boosters. So of course, we're using that for writing to help explain these concepts. I just the other day used it to completely redesign our homepage website to really guide people in this new world now that we have RailsX, to say, hey, I want very clear paths to be able to say, I want to start trading peer-to-peer. I want to start receiving Lightning payments. I want to start earning yields on my Bitcoin or my digital assets in this new Taproot asset world. And the AI was able to do that, and even structured out wireframes for me to be able to implement and pass to our designer to take it to the next phase.
Man, that's awesome. Can you speak a little to, say, someone's listening and they're like, I want to use this. I want to earn some yield on my Bitcoin. I want to learn about Lightning. Can you speak a little to the trade-offs? And I mentioned, like I said, for Nostr, I do use a custodial service just to not worry about the headache of opening channels. So for someone who wants to get started, what is all the way from the very beginner who's just starting to dabble, for someone who's like, no, I'm a hardcore developer. I got my own node running at the house. I know how to open channels. And just the trade-offs people should consider if they want to open, if they want to make an account and start earning some yield on their Bitcoin.
Sure. So we've got two products. One is like the yield side, and that's the automated market maker. That's what it's transforming into. So that's called Rails. That's amboss.tech/Rails. You could sign up. You could become a liquidity provider in different assets. Also, we can hook it into your payment system. So that's one way to do it. When you're talking about trade-offs, we built it first where we'll spin up a new Lightning node for you that runs in the cloud, so we can have that guaranteed uptime. But we saw that people really wanted hyper secure setups. So we enabled people to bring their own Lightning node and hook it into the system. And the only things that we need are a couple of permissions to make it so that we can help them automate it without having control over the funds. So the permissions that we take are the open channel permission, the closed channel permission, and also setting routing fees, as well as some view permissions to be able to see what it is that we're working on. And with those permissions, we're able to really automate the process so you don't have to think about managing channels. So we've we've already made the user experience for Rails phenomenal. So really all you have to do is deposit after writing down your 24-word seed phrase and creating a very secure password that is securing your funds. But all of it is client-side encrypted. So you don't have to trust Amboss with, control over your funds, because we never have those permissions in the setup. For Rails X, if say you want to start trading, that's the other side, and it's a very similar setup. We're going to help you spin up a Lightning node, or you can connect your existing Lightning node, and we'll set you up with some channels. So it works for L&D nodes because they have those fine-grained permissions that were developed by Google as macaroons.
Yeah, one of the things I'm curious about is, and I know, from an American perspective, I can get a brokerage account. It's not very hard. Someone can download Robinhood or whatever app, go in there, buy whatever stocks. But it does seem like, as much as I'm a Bitcoiner and I'm not very bullish on the other cryptocurrencies, I do see someone who's like, if you have Tether or USDC, and I mean, if you use a VPN in the United States, I'm not saying you should, but if you do and you say your location somewhere else, or if you're in one of these other countries, you can go on a perp stacks, and I understand you don't actually own the shares in the brokerage account, and there's different legal things to consider. But all of a sudden, someone who never had access to NVIDIA or MicroStrategy or Apple or whatever stock it was, or hell, I mean, people even talk about tokenizing houses. So you want to buy New York real estate, and the New York real estate person wants to get some liquidity out of their house without selling it. Now they're able to do so. So I'd love to hear, how you think Lightning might enable that, and have these capital markets be built on something like Lightning. Versus right now, obviously most of it's been on, some of the other coins. I think they're kind of agnostic, just whatever has the cheapest fees. I'd love to maybe hear you just talk about some of the advantages of putting it on Lightning.
Yeah. Of course, we've got entire token ecosystems, and Ethereum has really, glommed onto that market. Just, we can create a token for this. We could do the pump and dumps. We can have wild speculation. We can have all the rug pulls. But I think for Bitcoiners, we're building the real economy of the future, and also having to build some transitional tools. I mean, just like the early days, people aren't ready to deal with a raw private key. They like the 12-word seed phrase. That was a development that we had. And I think about stablecoins the same way, that this is the tool to help people get used to dealing with the raw power of Bitcoin. So this hooks them into the system and gets them speaking the same language. So you can speak to the rest of the Bitcoin network, even though you have a seed phrase and not a raw private key. So that's really how I frame it up.
Yeah, no, I think that's great framing. I mean, even a Noster, I've been a Bitcoiner for a while, and I'm comfortable managing private keys. But, you do kind of have it in the back of your mind. I try and tell people there are trade-offs associated with everything. As much as, someone might have beef with big social media companies because the incentive is to just kind of scroll to the lowest part of, someone's brainstem and get them hooked and feed them content that upsets them or gets them emotional. And hopefully Nostr can fix some of that. It's kind of nice that if I lose my password on one of these things, assuming I can get a customer support agent, I could reset it. Whereas my Nostr key got hacked, it's kind of like game over. There's no one I can call. That account is compromised. I'd have to make a new private key. But, it's taught me to learn, you got to make sure you secure your keys, try and keep them offline. Don't just enter your Nostr key in any random client, do your due diligence beforehand. And I think that transition is very important. And I also think, I'm kind of reminded of that quote, what is it? Science progresses with the death of each generation. I got 2 young kids, and I suspect that handling private keys to them would be second nature. They're not going to expect an older person, or even me, if there's a fraudulent credit card transaction, I'll report it, call the bank, they'll get me my funds back. If that happens in Bitcoin or some of these other platforms, it doesn't happen. But for kids growing up, it's just going to be second nature. They're going to have better private key management. The UX UI is going to get smoother. These, I'm sure Apple and Google and the likes will start integrating it into it. And I think, I think that's good because, it allows you to own your data, control your data. I mean, it still blows my mind on top of the zaps when I can go to another platform and just enter my private key and have all of my data come with me. And I think it's very good for, most of the internet has been kind of this smart server, dumb client, meaning that you have to, whenever I log into Twitter, I'm asking permission on my client, my computer, for the Twitter servers to, feed me all the data. They hold all my data. My client's just serving it. And Nostr kind of flips that on its head, which I think is very empowering. All of a sudden, my client, whoever has the private keys, that basically has access to all the data. I can go anywhere. These servers are just dumb servers relaying my data back and forth. That is proved I've signed for it. And I think is obviously is amazing, but it also I remind Andreas Antonopoulos, he had a great tweet one time that was like, maybe it was in a video, but he's like, if you build a panopticon, it stares back. And I just always thought that was so profound, because all of a sudden, in that panopticon, you're probably going to want to control your data. And I think all of these tools allow you to do so. And to your point, when you manage your private keys, there's going to be a transition, but more and more people will just get comfortable with that. And in a world of deepfakes and all the things AI is going to bring about, I think that's more important than ever.
Yeah, you brought up some great points, because one thing that we're introducing into the entire trading experience is self-custody, where your usual experience is you're moving money to someone else's custody. So they're holding the money, and even your own bank, you're trying to ask them permission to withdraw your own money. But this completely flips it on its head, because you're going to go through the banking system and deposit your funds on Lightning or via Bitcoin into your own self-custody setup, where you are the king. You have complete sovereignty to be able to make and receive payments anywhere in the world, and nobody can stop you. So this completely changes everything. This is breaking down barriers. This is allowing open access to full financial tools for the rest of the world, as well as the overbanked communities like in the U.S. But really anybody should be able to participate. And we're even doing some analysis right now to see if this peer-to-peer trading experience of RailsX would be able to serve New York, which has historically been extremely restricted because of the bit license, because we have a full self-custody setup for trading.
Yep, no, I work in client services, and I'm very familiar with how painful New York can be with the bit license. One thing I'd just like to ask is, obviously building a company is no easy feat. And I would love to just, as a builder, what has been the most challenging part? Has it been the regulatory stuff? Maybe actually just writing the software? I mean, AI helps with that, but, still, especially when you're, kind of helping people move funds around, you can't mess up. It's like, do or die. So I'd love to just hear, what has been some of the biggest challenges and how you guys have overcome them, and maybe speak a little bit too, as you were just saying, it's self-custodial, which actually allows people, I guess the point, one thing I thought was so cool is that, Europe's, I think, MiCA regulations really clamped down, and I don't think they were trying to encourage self-custody, but as a result, I think all these businesses were like, it's just too much money to comply with these licenses, so we are going to make sure the users have to self-custody because we don't want to touch funds. And usually, Bitcoiners talk about the effects of money printing and all these negative second and third order effects. It was kind of the opposite thing in this case, where and I'm sure it happens in the US too, they pass these regulations thinking it's going to give them more control. And in a way, the second and third order effect is actually, it forces businesses to push that responsibility onto the users, because they don't want to touch funds and then, be called a money transmitter or something like that if they don't have the license to do it.
100%. In this journey as a founder, I've learned a ton, and really, it's caused me to find out exactly how to use these different players. Almost like you're playing a game of chess. I've got builders for certain things. I've got investors for others. I've got advisors. And how do I use all of these pieces effectively to build a great business? And from the builders, of course, they can create incredible things. But as engineers, my biggest fear is them optimizing the wrong thing or focusing on the wrong problem. So I have to get them working on the right problem, measuring the right things that I can use to speak to investors, because the investors are all about metrics and have incredible minds to be able to say, to help you understand what your own product is and be able to communicate it to other investors. I had one investor describe Amboss as Waze for the Lightning Network, like the navigation app, and it absolutely blew my mind. It's like, yes, that is what we do, just by assisting with pathfinding on the Lightning Network, which is like this huge network of all of these channels, very similar to any highway network. So using investors to help understand and also help develop frameworks about how to run your company. So you could look at it as survival of the most paranoid and apply that to your business because you don't have any opportunities to mess up. You haven't raised enough money to make a mistake. So how are you going to use all of your pieces at your disposal to win?
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And your point about developers, one of my favorite memes is like, if you know those like toys that you put in front of a baby's crib or on top of, and it's got like the thing spinning around, and the meme is like, parents setting that up for the baby, and the parent says developers, and they're trying to set up the toy, and then you see the baby's view, and it says users, and it's looking up at like the butt of all the toys spinning around, and that meme always killed me. But it's to your point. I think there's some like very big, big brain, very smart developers, but if you don't build the right product, and it might seem amazing from the developer's point of view. It's also like the classic, there's like 10 people standing around an elephant and they're all trying to diagnose what it is, and they all have different points of view. So, it's cool to hear you talk about the different perspectives, and that actually does make a lot of sense. I know the Lightning Network is a routing thing, and, calling Amboss the ways. I think, those analogies, I know some Bitcoiners get upset. Bitcoin's not a battery, Bitcoin's not X, Y, and Z, but, those analogies, just people who are just getting into the space, they are so important for new people to the space, and I love that analogy of, Amboss is to the Lightning Network what Waze is to someone trying to avoid a ticket when they're on a road trip.
Right. Yeah, and it evolves at the same time, because the company that you start to create is not the same company that you will be 5 years later. Amboss really started as a data company and trying to do some advanced tools. We did a ton of machine learning research to be able to optimize all of this data, make useful tools out of it. And now I think we've become a liquidity coordinator for the Lightning Network and really a middleware solution. We've got some like end consumers, but really they're hobbyists that want to participate in a raw sense with the Lightning Network. But most of our customers are businesses that are now trying to get into this space, trying to save on payment processing, trying to get rid of chargebacks, trying to get basic banking services that traditional banks won't serve. That we're seeing a ton of that in the iGaming space. Any of these companies making gambling or sports betting tools anywhere in the world, well, they're having a heck of a time getting any type of bank account wherever they are in the world, but Bitcoin is there to serve them. And we do have the tools that can give them a great experience, and maybe a better experience than the rest of the companies out there that are still using traditional payment processing tools.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I know that chargeback risk too is huge, because as a business, I was just saying, the nicest of being able to call up a credit card company and say, hey, that was a fraudulent transaction. All those charges aren't always fraudulent. Someone just says, I don't want to pay for this or whatever it is. And the headache that businesses have to go through. Now, obviously, if you're an orange pill Bitcoiner, you're going to tell the businesses, if you hold this in your treasury, it's going to go over the long term, which I'm sure is true. Trying to sell someone who's just trying to run their business, they're not trying to think about monetary policy or any of this stuff, saying, I can not only lower your fees, but I can also eliminate the chargeback risk. I think that's like one of the very incredibly valuable overlooked things. And another thing I just love to hear you speculate on is how Lightning might be used by AI agents. I say that because, on the one hand, sure, I could give, like a Claude bot or, whatever it is, private keys to say 1,000,000 Satoshis, 1/100th of a Bitcoin. Say, here's $1,000. I need you to do X, Y, and Z. The AI runs into a task it can't do, so it goes on Fiverr because the task needs to be done in MeatSpace. Posts a bounty and says, I'll give whoever does this X amount, and then it continues on its way. But with Lightning, I think it enables even more exciting use cases because, you're able to stream stuff, or you're able, if you need some compute, the AI agent can go and stream, sats until their compute thing is satisfied. So, just kind of looking towards the future, what are, this is more speculative, but what are some of the use cases that you see Lightning might be able to enable?
Lightning is incredible for micropayments. The advantage that it has is you don't need a global state in order to make a transaction. So that means that I only need to talk to the person that I'm paying. And if we can open up a communication over the Lightning or over the internet, then we can start paying and transacting. And so that is a huge unlock. And because I don't have a global state, I don't have to pay for mining. I only need to pay for the digital signature and the communication between you and I. And that is way more scalable than any blockchain-based solution. And I know that there's a lot of blockchain momentum still going on. Thousands of blockchains later, we're still thinking that blockchain is the future, and it really isn't, because Lightning turns money into a data network. So that is really the scalability improvement. And if you look at some of the other blockchain-based solutions, like Solana, for example, it can do 17,000 transactions per second, way better than Visa. But you still can't do micropayments on Solana because there still is a mining cost and you still have a centralized record. If you try and go to the next level of scale, like let's think about ChatGPT and how it's disrupting Google searches. Like we're using ChatGPT instead of Googling something. And Google processes 183,000 Google searches per second. So that's the level of scale that we're addressing. So Solana cannot handle a single tech company's scale of online commerce. But Lightning Network can, because it can do 40 million transactions per second. So you can have many Googles all over the world. You can even do it in an interplanetary sense if you want. But we can have the entire global commerce happen on the Lightning Network because it's got that efficiency. You don't have that global state.
Yeah, 100%. And I've seen too, and correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know better, but I've seen people coming up with innovations for the Lightning Network. So I believe one is splicing. So instead of having to close and open channels, you would now be able to take part of your channel or, keep that channel open, but add even more liquidity to it. And on top of that too, I think it was Super Testnet, but if I'm wrong on that, I apologize. But someone was trying to make it so now one of the advantages of Bitcoin per se is that I can just post an address, BC15, whatever it is, on my website. I don't have to have a node running. I can just post that public key and someone can pay me. And I believe someone was working right now with Lightning. From my understanding, you have to keep that channel online. Otherwise payments can't flow through your channel. But someone's working on making it so Bitcoin or Lightning addresses, could be static. So someone could pay a Lightning address even if that node was offline, wait for it to come online, and then it would complete. But I think as these innovations start to accrue to the Lightning Network, it's just going to make it easier and just more seamless for the UI, the UX, the end user, the businesses providing the stuff. I mean, those innovations I think are going to play such a crucial role in having Lightning be, what you were just explaining that it could be.
It comes in little steps, and Lightning has a lot of kind of quirks that were there from the beginning and small bugs. So one of the things that you mentioned, and I think Super Testnet may have mentioned this, but it sounds like this is what you're talking about, is that you can publicize the public key of your node. And there's something called a key send message, which is a spontaneous payment. This is really kind of exploiting a bug in the original Lightning code, but we kept it in. And you do have to opt into it, but there are spontaneous payments. Now, on the accounting side, it's a nightmare. However, I'm willing to deal with that because people can spontaneously pay me. And many of the improvements that we have for Lightning have been on the user experience side. So Lightning address was a complete game changer. So I can blame Andre Nevis for that innovation to have something that looks like an email address actually be able to serve all of the invoicing and proper accounting for Lightning payments. So I can have a very simple experience with things that I'm used to, and that's handling all of my payment and transaction details.
Yeah, I think that's a pressure point. And I didn't realize it was kind of a bug being exploited to make this hacky solution. I think it kind of ties into your point about, blockchain really is just an inefficient database. If you want to have triple entry accounting and a global ledger that anyone can opt into, that's why we have an inefficient database that we call Bitcoin. But, just to put everything on chain, I mean, you're just better off, running a little SQL database on some server somewhere. Most things don't need to be on an inefficient database. It's just kind of funny to hear how, the more I play around as a developer, the more you realize that a lot of these solutions are kind of hacked together. Things just, it's like second and third order consequences that we talked about a little earlier. Sometimes there's these second and third order consequences that you never imagine would happen, but people sometimes build amazing products with them as a result. So that's really cool to hear.
Something you made me think about is, and you were talking about this earlier about regulation. sometimes pushing people in a certain direction. I don't know if you've ever heard about why we have newspapers that are these massive pages, like why they are constructed that way. And it was because there was a tax placed on newspapers, and the tax was based on per page. So they just made
No
the
way.
pages larger to have all the content in there. And as a result, we still have that today. And I imagine we'll still have little artifacts of our past and our history still make it into our language. Like that's as good as gold, when we know that the future is much more Bitcoin oriented. But I think that little tidbit is going to stick around for a while.
No, that's awesome. I had no idea that was the case, and that's really funny. One thing I wanted to ask about is, you see some of these other solutions coming out, like Arc Labs. They're making, a layer two. Cashew is an amazing one, and that seems to just work with Lightning. Pretty sure Arc works with Lightning too. I think Noster's enabled Lightning to expand as well. So I'd just love to hear, from not even maybe from an Amboss perspective, but just from a personal perspective, what of these technologies excites you the most, and do you see them, being in a symbiotic relationship with Lightning?
Yeah, I do see all of those being symbiotic. Arc, Chiming eCash, like both of those are innovations that extend the capabilities. I think for Arc, I'm most excited about it expanding Lightning's reach into consumer so they can keep self-custody. Now, like Arc is capable of doing that. The trade-off is, you don't have, you can't do the level of micropayments that you can with Lightning. It doesn't allow that transaction level scale, but it does mean that you don't have to run a server all the time to maintain channels. Whereas, Lightning is really emerging as a B2B solution, and that's where most of the payments are in the world, and you do need that level of scale, and running a server makes sense. For eCash, that really helps so that, the end consumer can maintain that privacy, but they are making a trade-off with custody. So I'm not as excited about that because it's a custodial solution. However, it's really cool to have privacy. Now, while the consumer has privacy, what does that mean as the operator? So I'm thinking from the business perspective, what's going to protect them to be able to allow them to continue operating this thing? Because a regulator may look at that and say, hey, you're enabling criminals and what have you. They're going to throw everything at that operator because, you've got the one person that can be summoned into a courtroom that, they could go after if they wanted to stop someone.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point to think about. And, for like Chiming eCash, I just thought, maybe for like a family or something. Like the reality is, I think an unfortunate truth is pain is the best teacher. And most people in the United States, they have bank accounts, they have financial rails that work. But, say someone in a place that doesn't have those same rails, maybe them, a friend, another family member they trust, opens up that mint. But there's still those different attack vectors, and kind of just goes back to the point about second and third order consequences. And I think as a Bitcoiner, you start to see those trade-offs everywhere in every solution. None of it's perfect, but the optionality it enables. I mean, in a way, like I'm not really for globalization on a nation level, but in terms of sovereign individuals, I don't want a government telling me I can't trade with someone in El Salvador or even North Korea or China or Europe or Russia or whatever. I think it's amazing to allow the individuals to cooperate. And I think one of the beautiful second and third order effects of Bitcoin, I don't think it's a panacea by any means, but I do believe deep down that, fiat enables war. I think there's I could go on a rant why I think that, but I think when you can print money and you don't have to tax population, you can fund wars that otherwise would not be popular and people would protest against much more if they knew how much they were being robbed to enrich weapons manufacturers, corrupt politicians, etc. And, I love to see tools that are allowing the individual to cooperate. And I hope that, on a long enough time horizon that we'll see Bitcoin be a tool to disincentivize war. Because in the past, you destroy a country, you win the war, you can go and you take their gold, their land, their real estate. Bitcoin doesn't fix that, but you can no longer take their Bitcoin. If they store most of their wealth in Bitcoin, there's no guarantee you get it. They've managed their private keys right. You're more incentivized, I think, on a lot. It's like you're trying to turn a tanker. To do a 180 on a tanker, it's going to take a while. But I think Bitcoin kind of tilts towards more peace and cooperation because the incentive is to trade with that person if you want their Bitcoin rather than attack them. And I'm hopeful that's one of the second and third order effects of Bitcoin continuing to grow and become a bigger and bigger asset that sovereign nations and the individual uses in their everyday lives.
It's beautifully put, and it reminds me that Bitcoin itself is not valuable. It's only a reflection of all the other value in society, and when we have things like war, they're incredibly destructive things. Whereas Bitcoin in many ways represents peace and hope by comparison, because it's a reflection of the actual prospering, the cooperation that people have in order to build efficiencies and move humanity in the right direction with a long time horizon, to have that low time preference, to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor over a long period of time, over generations. And it really forces you to think in that way, that you're thinking about inheritance. How will my kids deal with private keys? What about the man in the coma? These types of conversations that Bitcoiners have are not common outside of the Bitcoin space. And it really is bringing some of those ideas home.
Yeah, well said. I mean, this is anecdotal, but I'll tell you, all of my friends that are Bitcoiners are popping out babies left and right. They've lowered their time preference, quote unquote. They're thinking a lot more long term. And my friends who are not so far down the rabbit hole, I don't blame them, but the cost of living is going up. Having a kid's not cheap. I mean, I used to live up in Boston, and I miss it because the Bitcoin scene up there was so fantastic, and I met so many people. But I did move back home just because I wanted to be near family. And obviously saving in Bitcoin has helped tremendously, but just being near family. And, I want more people to have babies. I always joke Bitcoin and Bitcoiners are number go up technology. And I think it just bodes in very well with your point that you lower your time preference. It's just funny. I mean, it's like a paradox, right? Everyone comes to Bitcoin because of the greed. They want the number to go up. They want to get rich, and I can't blame anyone for that. But greed, isn't really associated with a positive connotation. But the more you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, it kind of does become a moral imperative. And it's just funny that what gets people in is greed. But then the more they go down the rabbit hole, they're like, no, this is incredibly beneficial for the world. And, it's harder to pitch someone who's not down the rabbit hole on that aspect, that Bitcoin's going to be this force for good, that it's going to reduce methane emission, and that it's going to make global cooperation more of a thing. But I do think that's one of the biggest paradoxes of Bitcoin. And, I love to see that, as you were saying, people who go down the rabbit hole tend, not everyone, but most people tend to lower their time preference, think long term, start families, etc.
I love it. You tapped on one thing that I'm quoted for, that is still floating around Twitter, is that never before has greed tempted me to live a very simple life, and that's what was speaking truth to me at the time, because I was just thinking about how can I save more money for the future so I could buy more Bitcoin, just because I'm greedy. But it stopped me from spending things just frivolously. I was thinking less as a consumer. I don't need all of these other things. I just want to, live my simple life and save as much as I can.
No, man, that's beautifully said in a fantastic tweet. I hadn't seen that before, but I absolutely love that. And I'm gonna have to, maybe I'll screenshot it and post it on Nostr and see if someone will at me some stats for
Let's go.
for that tweet. Speaking of Twitter, one thing I want to ask about, and it's not necessarily just like I don't want a price prediction or anything like that, but it seems like sentiment is so down in the dumps on Twitter. And I know Bitcoin, we just had a new all-time high in Q4, and now it's down to whatever it is, around 90. But it just seems like the things that are being built, the progress we're making, I mean, it just seems like such an exciting time in the space. And I can't tell if the sentiment on Twitter is so bad because that's what Twitter's feeding me, just to, keep me looking and get my emotions up, or, if people maybe, are missing the forest for the trees. I would just kind of love to hear your thoughts in general on, the progress Bitcoin's made. I mean, love or hate Trump, and obviously the meme coining wasn't exactly ideal for Bitcoiners, but it's nice to at least have an administration that isn't attacking, Bitcoin developers or crypto developers in general. But yeah, I would love to just kind of hear your thoughts on, current market conditions and how Bitcoin's been progressing.
I think I just saw the sentiment analysis is at extreme fear for Bitcoin, which is wild to have happen at $88,000 per Bitcoin, which, to me is phenomenal. So this tells me that, while others are fearful, I want to be greedy. So, to me, it's an incredible time to stack. And it's a weird time because we really violated the 4-year cycle. I think that thesis is dead now. And I guess the new thesis is this is just related to global liquidity and the global business cycle. But I'm strapping in because things are about to get wild out in the world. I think in many ways we've got things that lead to civil war. We got things, World War III. Like the world is going mad, but Bitcoin keeps pumping out blocks, despite the massive ice storm that we experienced recently. It continues to do what it does. It's just doing its math, and math just keeps mathing.
Yeah, no, that Warren Buffett quote is so prescient. Be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. I saw a Checkmate post today from this was a couple months ago, but he's like, some of the best financial decisions I ever made felt like just terrible ones when I made them, and some of the worst financial decisions I ever made felt amazing at the time when I made them. And I just think that's so spot on. I mean, I remember being in college and first getting into Bitcoin, and then watching it ride to 20K and then down, and it just kind of hovered around. And I mean, obviously COVID, a flash crash to 3K, but I've learned I'm just a terrible trader, and just simply saving in Bitcoin, forgetting about it, not planning on touching that money for 5 to 10 years. People ask me, I say, the only really reason I ever say to sell Bitcoin is if you want to make a life-changing purchase, a home for your family, whatever it is. I mean, people got to decide that by themselves. But it really does kind of, the deeper down the rabbit hole I get, just kind of seems like the last trade. And, it's not that I want price to go down, but I think then the more you kind of look at it like this is not an investment. I'm not betting a company. I'm not betting Apple's going to make iPhones and deliver them. I'm simply converting my money into another, form of currency that another man can't print. I'm getting rid of these cuck bucks and I'm putting them into something that is truly scarce. And I think that mindset, it kind of just helps you feel better about these dips. My cuck bucks buy me more sats every time I, buy some. So it makes it a lot easier, I think, when you look through it in that lens. And sometimes I think it just, the more cycles you go through, and I'm with you. I think the 4-year cycle's dead, which is great to see, because I don't think Bitcoiners want to see an 80%. It'd be awesome to go to $1 million, but if we had an 80% drawdown to 200K, that would really hurt. So I think it's nice to kind of see Bitcoin mature like this and the asset class grow up. And I think, as much as Bitcoiners might not like the institutions, I do think that's a lot of just passive money flowing in, a lot of people who trade a little differently than retail. And I heard a Joe Carlasari quote where he was like, Bitcoin's going to bore its way to $1 million. And I kind of like that framing. I could see it just constantly legging up, and we hover, and leg up, and we hover. And that cheap dopamine that we all got, watch the volatility and Bitcoin Twitter freaking out. And I do think we're kind of entering into a different era where, who knows, maybe I'll be eating glass and I'm just totally wrong on this, but I'm kind of with you that I think the 4-year cycle is dead. And I think that would be funny to see Bitcoin bore its way to $1 million.
It might just happen. I think we're going to get a slow drip of liquidity, for many years to come, because, the national debt isn't getting any smaller. We've got more bailouts are in the future, and we've got an administration, we've got companies stacking that is, pro Bitcoin. We've got a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and it's, I guess, we could just keep stacking, be patient, watch it play out, and it might be just boring. And that would be just fine.
100%. I'm reminded of a Fidelity study where they checked, who had the best returns of all of our investors. And I might be botching the study a little bit, but from my understanding, it was the dead people who tend to have the best returns because they just bought assets and never touched them, which, is probably the last thing most people want to hear. But, I've learned the painful way. I'm just a bad trader. I do not make good trades. So I think when you can zoom out and, it's like Safety always says, you shouldn't be a doctor and then come home and spend, 20, 30 hours a week trying to be a financial analyst. Focus on your craft and, let Bitcoin do the work. And in doing so, it makes life so much easier.
I am appreciative of the traders, though, because they do fit a certain role in society. They do help with price discovery. So, they're buying things and selling others. They're doing the arbitrage. And what we've actually set up with our product with RailsX is really arbitrage. It's fixing an issue with multiple assets in the Lightning Network, where we've got users buying one currency and selling to another user on the same system. So it's been a whole change, because as a Bitcoiner, I'm thinking about save. I'm a horrible trader, but I actually need the traders in the system to do that speculation and to solve the arbitrage problems. So it's going to be wild. I'm very excited to watch it play out.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, I might not be a good trader, but I do think you're right that they provide a ton of value to society. And I think in some cases we've hyper financialized things, which is not necessarily what you want. But there is definitely a role for traders. This is more speculating, but say 100 years from now, Bitcoin's still out in blocks every 10 minutes. What do you think it's going to look like? Is the average person, unless their great grandpa saved a bunch of sats, never touched the base chain? Do you think most of it will happen on Lightning? Do you think the people who are using the base chain will likely be settling? I don't know. It probably won't be denominated in dollars at that point. I suspect that, I always joke that the Austrians are right about the dollar at some point going to fail, but I suspect the Keynesians will be able to kick the can down the road a lot longer than many of us would like or expect for it to happen. But yeah, just looking out 100 years, how do you think most transactions will be settled? How will most people in the world interact with something like Bitcoin?
I think one of the best steps that we can take right now is just how do we pack as much information as possible into Bitcoin, because that is the record of humanity that really cannot be corrupted. So that's my hope. This is our historical record, and we're gonna have to come up with all the creative ways that we can to pack the information of history into there. I think the natural step is to make every Bitcoin transaction a Lightning channel open or close. That, in that way, makes this entire dynamic economy a map and turns each Bitcoin transaction into infrastructure that can be used over and over and over again. So this is going to be the aluminum can of the financial system. So yeah, super efficient to recycle, a ton of work to set up, maybe to manage after mining, but really this is something that we can reuse over and over and over again.
That's a great analogy, the aluminum can of finance, if you will. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like the op return, the inscription debates kind of died down, which is probably for the best. But I do go back and forth, because I am sympathetic. I don't want to see the chain just clogged up and node runners have to deal. My Raspberry Pi, it's got a 1 terabyte hard drive. I'm gonna have to upgrade at some point to a 2 terabyte here pretty soon, right? But at the same time, I think you're spot on, and I've inscribed my name in an op return just because, in my family's name, just 'cause it's kind of cool that it's going to live on for as long as Bitcoin lives on. And then I think there's something to be said too, is AI makes deepfakes so easy. I love sitting here generating AI pictures, and my team Slack channel, I always generate one and throw it in at the end of the day, just because it takes me all of 2 minutes. So you're like, chat, build me a picture like this, improve my prompt, take the prompt it gives me, throw it in. It makes a sweet picture. But in that same world, it'd be trivial for someone to clone my voice on this podcast and call my parents. It'd be trivial for someone to make a fake picture of me doing anything. So I say that because I think the deepfakes are going to get insane. And to have some ledger of truth where, Jason Lowry talks about, you have an opportunity cost. No one's making more Bitcoin. 3 ways to get Bitcoin: spend your fiat, offer good and service for Bitcoin, mine it. That's it. No one's printing it. So I think having a chain where anything that gets put on there, it's going to be incredibly valuable. But I see both sides of the argument. I don't want to see the chain littered with spam or stupid stuff, but I also think it's going to be almost a Library of Alexandria. And so I don't know. That is me kind of rambling, but I go back and forth because I see both sides of the argument, and I'd love to hear how you think about it.
Yeah, it's a complex one. On the op return side, I have to realize that Bitcoin is neutral, and if we try to control what other people do, then we've introduced subjectivity into an objective math-based system. And I think that's one of the biggest risks that the entire system can have. So knowing that, then we can just let economics play, and we can outcompete any of the desires for art in the blockchain to be outcompeted by our desire for financial system or to have that financial record. And it's just going to be wild to watch because here we have a scarce shared resource. And one way to think about it is like, this is our national park. The tragedy of the commons in many ways is like the festival of the commons that Andreas Antonopoulos brought out. You know, this is a shared resource that produces so much good. And it's great that we have, you know, people caring so loudly about like what goes into this Bitcoin blockchain. However, it is a neutral shared resource, and it needs to be able to work for everyone without judgment, without prejudice.
Yeah, your point on subjectivity is so prescient, and I didn't mention that, but that is absolutely one thing. You know, if we start censoring certain transactions, like there's obvious stuff no one wants to see put on the chain unless you're just a terrible person set out to destroy Bitcoin. But at the same time, the second you start saying this transaction can't come through, this one can, you lose that permissionless money. And while I didn't want to see Opportune necessarily get blown out, I don't know if that was the right move. I'm also with you. It's like, it's such a slippery slope if you start trying to censor what transactions can and can't get into the chain. So it is going to be a fascinating debate to watch. Jesse, I know we're coming up on the hour here. I could chat with you forever, man. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. But I always like to ask this of other Bitcoiners when I get the chance. If you could ask Satoshi Nakamoto one question, what would it be?
I would want to hear Satoshi Nakamoto's opinion on time. I think of the citations that he made, most of them were about timekeeping. And I don't think we really get to the bottom of that, because the way that Bitcoin keeps time is this just wild other piece of this entire puzzle. Right now, you know, we've got the declining hash rate because of this massive winter storm that's hit most of the US and knocked out power, caused, I think, is going to be one of the largest difficulty decreases ever in Bitcoin's history, with 15% going down. So it's really something that I would love to get a handle on, because the difficulty adjustment is something that Bitcoiners know about and is the most beautiful aspect of Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, that is a fantastic answer and an excellent point. It is crazy to have like a global state shared ledger, and you're able to, the way he basically organized it, you can share time. It's like the time chain, if you will. My little one. Hi on the podcast. Anyway, Jesse, man, it has been a pleasure chatting. To anyone who tuned in, thank you so much for listening. And Sloan, any parting words before we hop off here? Maybe I'll ask Sloan, please don't mess this one up. What's the best money, Bitcoin or fiat?
Bitcoin.
That's right. There we go. She's been saying fiat to mess with me recently, so that's huge, Sloan. Awesome. Well, anyone who tuned in, thank you so much. Yeah, my pleasure, Jesse.
$60 just to move was mine. 15-minute window transaction didn't arrive. Had to pay the fee again, that was a sign. Beautiful system, terrible design. Wrestling raw code on a Raspberry Pi. Command line mystic with an engineer's eye. Saw the future underneath all that friction. Payments at the speed of pure conviction. Somewhere in the world a couple seeds drop down. Chickens come running at the lightning sound. Instant feedback, fractions of a cent. My own policies, that's what it meant. Magic keeps mapping. Blocks keep stacking. World goes mad but the chain don't crack. Lightning keeps mapping. liquidity's poised 5 years in. You're not the same machine, started with an explorer, now you're the in-between. Middleware monarch, channels like highways, peer-to-peer trading, self-custody always. Rails X drops, a circle payment spins, out one channel, back another, everybody wins. 9.5 trillion on the Forex floor, Lightning said we'll take that and some more. 40 million TPS, no global state, turn money into data, let the network arbitrate. Magic keeps mapping, blocks keep stacking. World goes mad but the chain don't crack. Lightning keeps mapping, no looking back. No looking back. Never before has greed tempted me to live a very simple life, less to take, more to give. Aluminum can of finance, recycle, reuse the lane. Every transaction infrastructure running through the chain. Stable coins at the edges, meet them where they stand. Merchant doesn't care what currency lands. None of my business what you receive. Open neutral protocol, just believe the speed. Deep fakes coming, clone a voice by noon. Need a ledger carved in math immune. Library of Alexandria on a time chain. Neutral shared resource, no one gets the reign. Tragedy of commons, flip into a feast. Festival of commons, west and east. Objective system, introduce no bias. Let economics play, let the market try us. Magic keeps mapping, blocks keep stacking. World goes mad but the chain don't crack. Lightning